On this edition of We Are the Watchmen Weekly Live, we ask the tough question: what happens when you stand up for conservative Christian principles and you're pushed out because you're too edgy? What do you do? Do you just crawl into a hole and do nothing? Or do you do what our guest on today's show does? You stand up as a believer, you do great work, and then you get the support along with God's guidance and his hand. We'll talk with the CEO of RedBalloon.work coming up next on We Are the Watchmen Weekly Live. Stay tuned. Welcome back to We Are the Watchmen Weekly Live. What a treat for us this week. The CEO of RedBalloon.work, Andrew Crapuchettes, is on the show with us this week. Andrew, thank you for coming on I guess what would be short notice because we talked earlier this week, but it's great to have you on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, RC, and it's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, it's been wonderful to get to know you all a little bit.
Yeah, we are when we do the show, we write the publication, We Are the Watchmen Weekly. We cover some heavy topics, and we want to balance the difficult topics with some of the wins we have, right? Because in the fight, the Lord gives us the tools that we need to win, but He puts the onus on us to make the effort to have those victories. So it is nice to talk about people who are taking those steps, walking in faith, making things happen so that we build awareness that us as believers and as conservatives are actually doing things and there are resources available. So, Andrew, before we get into Red Balloon and the great work you're doing there, I was fascinated by your testimony this week of how you got to this point. Can you share with the audience your testimony and how you got to where you are with Red Balloon?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I'll rewind a little bit farther back. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up in a Christian home. My dad was one of the early tech guys in the Bay Area, helped install some of the early computers at Stanford University. So we were very much involved in that world, but we saw the culture of the San Francisco Bay Area kind of changing, where Christianity was not welcome. And I was pretty deep in the tech world, even as a very young man. And realized that it was difficult to live your values out loud in the Bay Area. That was connected with just some family movement stuff, and we decided, we're going to move up to Idaho, find a spot where I can actually afford to buy a house. Which at the time in the Bay Area, the late '90s, when the .com excitement was happening, it was like impossible to buy a house as a young man. So move up to Idaho, buy a house, kind of establish a life, but also realize that there weren't a lot of good jobs here in town. And I think as a Christian, whenever you can give someone the opportunity to work hard to support their family and live a prosperous life, you're giving them a really important gift. And it's a gift that allows them to make different decisions, right? If you have a job where you can afford to put your kids into a private school if you want to, or if you want your wife to stay home, she can afford to, or going on family vacations, right? There's all of these, I guess, family-based decisions that have a lot of cultural impact that are based on the ability to earn enough money to do those things. And so I've always had this passion for how do we drive jobs in our community that are family sustaining and are prosperous, right? And so I went on kind of this mission to start a lot of businesses. I started a 3D printing business that I went ahead and sold to a big engineering firm. I started a student information software business, a bunch of failed businesses, little websites, various things. Learned a lot of lessons along the way. And the last business that I was running was called MZ, Economic Modeling Specialists International. I started it with two economists who were at the university professors. And this is going to sound funny, but our initial business goal for the company was not, hey, we're going to make $1 million. Hey, we're going to make $10 million. Our initial business goal was 50 people earning over $50,000 a year in our community. So 50 at 50 in Moscow, Idaho. And I know that, if you're in a big community, it's like, why does that even make a dent? But if you're in a small college town here in Idaho, well, that's a big difference. And we started this in the very early 2000s, and our goal of 50 at 50, we're like, look, we're going to start to move the needle in this town. If we have more and more people earning enough income, they can go out to dinner, they can take vacations, they can support the ministries that they want to, because they have the income and the resources to do that. So 50 at 50 was our initial business goal, and God really blessed that. And we grew the business to a $50 million tech business. We had an office in the UK and East Coast, and then our headquarters here in Moscow, and obviously hired hundreds of people, well over $50,000 a year, and was able to bless a lot of people through that whole thing. And I, as a CEO, was trying to figure out, like, how do I be a Christian CEO? How do I live my values out loud? I don't need
Mhm.
to jam them down anybody else's throat. I don't need to, require anything at work that would either be illegal or just isn't the right thing to do for other people. And so as Christians and as employees, potential employees would come in, I would just tell them, hey, I'm an unapologetic conservative Christian. And I'm going to run the business like that. Now, some of the ramifications of that, it's not a prerequisite, it's not a weird thing. Some of the
Mhm.
ramifications of that is we're going to have zero tolerance for sexual harassment, or we're not going to have any gossip in the office. Nobody's talking behind each other's back. So they're all good cultural things that I just said, look, this is how I'm going to live it out as a Christian CEO. It really was no problem. I had customers all over the political and ideological spectrum. I had employees all over the political and ideological spectrum, and everybody got along just fine until 2021 ran around, the year the world lost their mind.
Yeah.
And that's the year that my board, who otherwise was kind of pretty level headed about everything we were doing, decided that I needed to start making a lot of political and cultural statements that I was totally unwilling to make. And so this was a pretty difficult time because we're a business that's growing 25% a year with a 40% margin. So we're making them a ton of money. And they're telling me that I need to require masks or require vaccine mandates or put a black square on my social media profile. And I'm like, look, I run a data company, it's a software company. Why would I want to ostracize half of my customers, or even if it's 20% of my customers? Why would I want to
Right.
ostracize any of my customers by taking a very hard left political view? And even if that wasn't a concern, I wouldn't do it because it's not the right thing to do. So that ended up costing me my job, but I thought, this is the thing I need to go to bat on. And in fact, my board went so far as to say, you are welcome to be CEO who happens to be a Christian on the weekends, but we don't want you to be a Christian CEO. And I'm like, well, it
Whoa.
sounds like you want me to not bring my whole self to work. And they're like, no, 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 it's not like that. I'm like, it's actually entirely like that. So I ended up exiting that business, kind of a painful season of my life, just to be honest.
Yeah.
Although my sweet wife had my back all the way, and she gave me a nice bottle of scotch as a way to go. You lost your job, but at that moment, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a year off. I've
Mm.
been blessed on a lot of fronts. I'm working on commercial real estate. I've got housing development I'm doing. Love doing that stuff, but I'm just going to take a year off. Um, and then a friend kind of challenged me. They said, look, you were just given a choice between your job and your values. And you had the financial wherewithal to be able to choose your values, which costs you your job. But for a lot of conservatives and Christians, if they're given that choice, it's a lot harder for them because let me give you an example. If as a conservative or Christian, you're told, hey, you better stop this or you're going to get canceled off Facebook. Most of us are going to be like, I'm going to shrug that off. I don't care that much about Facebook, whatever, right? Unless you make a living that way. But if you're
Mhm.
told you have to do this thing or else you can't pay your mortgage or feed your kids, well, you're going to be very tempted to compromise on something you hold very dearly. And so this person challenged me. They said, you need to use your skills and ability to bless other people and give them a landing page
Mhm.
or a place where they can land if they're kind of given this very difficult decision at work. So that's where RedBalloon.work came from. Is just, how do I bless other people who are given this same kind of choice in our funny American culture, whether it's cancel culture, and I've met lots of people affected by that, or the
Mhm.
vaccine mandates, or
Yeah.
DEI training, or CRT training, or all these other things where they are not able to live their values out loud, their faith out loud at work, and it costs them their job. They can come to RedBalloon.work and find a new job. So, and it has been extraordinary in the 2.5 years that we've been doing it. We have over 4,000 businesses, over 2 million job seekers. You just see momentum because freedom, which is really our focus at Red Balloon, freedom to work, freedom is still very much in demand in America, which should be encouraging to all of us.
So, Andrew, when we talked earlier this week, you had told the story about how it actually launched, which I thought was hilarious because it got us to that moment where people say, oh, something goes viral. So, you decide that you're going to do it. What happens in the next few days or few weeks after that?
Yeah. So I have this tech background. So my brother and I actually knocked out the job board in like a weekend. We're like, let's just make a job board. It'll be fun. So we knock it out. Ta-da! We've got a job board. And I was just going to be like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm just going to let employers and employees find each other. Maybe I've done my thing, checked my box. I'm going to get back to my real estate endeavors. But then I start getting thank you notes from people who found a job through Red Balloon. I'm like, oh man, maybe I should do more of this. And then I get this call from Fox and Friends. And truth be told, Fox and Friends is a really big show, obviously.
Yep.
Um, and I didn't know what it was at the time because I wasn't much of a media junkie. And so I'm like, okay, I'd be happy to come on your show. Is it a kids show? Like, I don't know what Fox and Friends is. Like, hey, Mr. Weasel, what do we, like I don't know, And so they're like, no, it's kind of a major news outlet. And they said the reason we want you on the show is because you are the leading job board for businesses that don't have a vaccine mandate. And
Mm,
that was kind of this funny moment, right? Because at that moment, I had like, I don't know, a couple hundred employers, a couple thousand job seekers. Like we were tiny, we were a rounding error in that
mhm.
space. But what they were telling me is that I was the only one at that moment who was willing to stand up and put a stake in the ground and say, no, this is who we are. We're living our values out loud. Not everybody has to participate. We're not the right fit for anyone, but anyone who doesn't have vaccine mandates and is willing to, and my stance at the time was not crazy. I said, look, if you want to get a vaccine, that's entirely your decision. Most of you are free adults. But that's a conversation you should probably have with your doctor, not your HR department. Right.
Right.
And I said that out loud, like the news outlets are like, no one's ever said anything like this. So, yeah, so I go on Fox and Friends. We had 100 new customers that day and 40,000 new job seekers. And then I start kind of going on this series of media interviews, just trying to say the truth out loud, the thing that a lot of people were thinking but weren't willing to say. And it's funny how God blesses it when you do that, when you actually have courage. And I had a lot of friends reach out to me on social media and say, look, I love what you're doing. I can't like what you're doing because it'll cost me my job, but I do love what you're doing. So, yeah, funny time. And it's funny how God blesses these things. My wife actually wrote an article in the Federalist saying, my husband wasn't fired, he was redeployed. And when the king
Amen.
gives you a new hill to go take, who are you to say no? And so I was given a new hill. And so here I am, Red Balloon.
Amen. So, Andrew, there are many people because Juliana and I have talked to a number of them. The way that they encountered the job board is through some of the creative ads that you have, and I think the one that may be most well known is the kids making
Yeah,
a statement. Can you talk to us about how that came about? Because that commercial, it is hilarious, but it is also kind of like you said a minute ago, it's what everybody wants, they're thinking and they want to say, but they can't. So how did that happen?
that's right. That's right. So, and it's funny because that ad, particularly Joe Rogan shared at the end of last year, saying it was his favorite ad of 2023, which is kind of cool. So,
Yeah.
that ad, I was actually sitting down with my good friend Brett Craig, and Brett is a world class creative. Brett was the chief creative officer for Deutsch LA, which is a huge ad agency. So, if you know the Fanville ads, that Dr. Pepper does. So those were
Yeah.
kind of his brainchild. So he only worked on like multi-million dollar ads that went in the Super Bowl and that kind of thing. But about the same time that I ended up losing my job, he ended up losing his job because he was a no way around it, white conservative Christian male. And that was just not a category, and they needed to fire someone to appease the woke mob. And so he ended up losing his job. He said it was like in 36 hours, he just felt like the walls were closing in on him. So he ended up going and doing some work for the Daily Wire and some other organizations, but we stayed in touch because we had, some correlators on our story. And so we were sitting down, maybe having a glass of wine saying, what would be something, because I don't have an ad budget, right? I can't place this ad in, on Fox News for $1 million or whatever it is. I need
Right.
to figure out like, what could I do that would be memorable and shareable, because that's really what we can pull together. So I will give Brett all the credit for the idea and the creativity. He's like, what would be fun is if we had kids say in the affirmative things that we think are absolutely crazy. He says, in part because there's a lot of conservatives that are at these woke businesses who are just kind of live and let live. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to go through my ninth DEI training and it's not going to affect me. I'm going to be fine. Right. But then when you're like, here are kids that if we don't stand up and fight, what kind of world are we leaving them? What kind of world are we building for them? And so
Yeah.
we wanted, to kind of remind people that we are fighting for the next generation, not just ourselves.
Mhm.
And we wanted to make it funny. And yeah, that I think checked all of those boxes.
It fascinated me because I didn't realize at first. I think a lot of people, they hear the introduction and whatever, and they have no idea. They're just like, "Oh my god, I
Right.
can't wait to hear the next thing because this is so ridiculous."
Right.
And then the message is at the end, which is a brilliant way to market. So, Andrew, one of the things that's happened in the job market today, we have this weird contrast where you've got employees or people who interview that ghost, but now you have companies really kind of doing the same thing. Are you finding any of that sort of thing in the Red Balloon universe, or are we actually seeing maybe what we would expect to see is that when people of good moral character who are conservatives and believers get together, interviewee, interviewer, company, employee come together in such a way that those shared values eliminate those types of issues? What are you seeing?
Yeah, it is incredible when I have heard from so many employers, they're like, man, all the people applying to jobs through Red Balloon, um, they come across, and I don't have to walk on eggshells in the whole interview, afraid that they're going to sue me over every little thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, um, we don't want to discriminate in illegal ways. We don't want to be disrespectful to anyone, but we live in a culture where people are offended at the drop of a hat, and they will and so what happens is you self-censor because you don't know what they're gonna think or what they're gonna do based on this thing that you're saying. And unfortunately that causes us to kind of lose a lot of ground on the conservative Christian side because we're not living our values out loud. In fact, we had one business who reached out. They said, so we just hired someone through Red Balloon and they were cleansing to our culture because they were brave. They'd come through tumultuous
Mm,
time. They'd kind of lost their job. They come to Red Balloon. They find this job. Like they're cleansing to our culture to the point that they are joyful. They are cheerful. They work really hard, and they're not afraid to just live their values out loud. In other words, people ask them, "What'd you do this weekend?" They're like, "Well, I went to church with my family, and it was amazing." And this employer
mhm.
was telling me what happened is you started to see that 95% of the employees in the business agreed with that person. They just were all self-censoring, kind of keeping their head down. And one brave person just made the whole culture joyful and courageous and hardworking all over again. And this employer was like, I don't know how to thank you because that was such a dramatic impact on our business and all the people around it. So anyway, so yeah, you're going to just find a different kind of people coming through RedBalloon.work, people who want to focus on work and meritocracy and who are looking for freedom. And if you respect their values and let them work hard, it is incredible what can be accomplished. It's also really interesting that a lot of I've had thank you notes from job seekers who said, "Hey, I
Mhm.
just wanted you to know that you saved my marriage because the job that I
Oh,
was in before, when you're swimming in woke oppressive waters at a job for 8 to 10 hours a day, you tend to kind of bring that home. That has an impact on every aspect of your
mm,
life. But then when you get a new job where you're allowed to be free and you can live your values out loud, and you're still expected to work hard. In fact, work harder sometimes because
right.
you're a child of God. But when you do that, it just has an impact on all your other interactions. And so sometimes we think, well, I'm not really affected by my job. You absolutely are affected by your job. It's how God built the world. It's okay. You just don't want to be in a job that affects you and impacts you poorly.
So it's amazing to hear, Andrew, but this goes back to what you said a little while ago about when you're in line and handling the Lord's business and he can work through you. He blesses that. And
Yes.
it requires you to step out on faith and say, Lord, I know you got this or you wouldn't have me doing it. And when you do that, then it's like if he can get it through you, he can get it to you,
Yeah.
is the saying. And it's amazing to hear that. And I think that as people watch this, they're going to become convicted. It's like I knew I needed to make a move, and this is the thing I needed. I needed to see and hear. So on that, Andrew, you've now built this great base, right? Red Balloon is
Yeah.
working. We've got the success stories. What things are you working on now? What else has the Lord blessed you guys with to be able to help more businesses or more people?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah,
Hmm.
so job boards coming along. We've got over 1,000 applicants every single week. We've got over 100,000 unique visitors every month. We've been able to be an important part of the career story for a lot of people, which has just been an incredible blessing, far beyond what I could have imagined. But we also have some employers who come to us and say, "Look, we're kind of in a tough spot because we know that hiring well takes a lot of time." And it's fraught with lawsuits, right? You ask the wrong question in an interview, you get yourself a lawsuit. But if you don't ask those questions, you might get yourself a really bad culture fit that will then bring a lot of heartache and loss of productivity at your business. And then you get a lawsuit. So nobody
Okay.
likes either one of those outcomes, right? And even if you're getting great people through Red Balloon, you still need to put the time and energy into the process of hiring. And so the employers are coming to us and say, look, our options are we post a job and then we have to do a lot of work, kind of a do-it-yourself hiring process, or either hire an in-house recruiter or we go and get a corporate recruiter. The problem is corporate recruiters generally are going to charge you 20 to 40% of the first year salary of the person that they hire for you. Well, if you're looking for a new marketing person at $120,000 a year, you need to expect to pay $40,000 for them to help you hire for that position. Well, for a lot of small businesses, which are the ones that are on Red Balloon primarily, that's a
Mhm.
non-starter, right? You can't spend $40,000 per hire and then pay the salary of the person that you just brought in.
Right.
And there's also this weird misalignment of incentives, right? If you're a recruiter, even if you're a really good person, but you're getting paid based on how much the person is going to get paid who you're bringing, well, you want to bring the most expensive person possible because
Right.
then you are going to get a larger commission check. And so, in one sense, you're kind of not working for the employer, you're working for the job seeker, even though the employer is paying you. So it
Mhm.
put employers in kind of this weird position where they struggled sometimes to trust the recruiter, but they didn't have really a choice if they wanted to find top talent and kind of a nationwide search. So our employers came to us and said, Andrew, can you just solve this problem for us? Like, yeah, sure. I'm an entrepreneur, no problem. So we kind of reinvented the recruitment world. And so what we do today is we charge $4,500 as a flat rate. And we will do 2 months of hard recruiting for you, where we help write a job description. We do a compensation review. We'll reach out to at least 30 people a week on your behalf and make sure that they're aware of the job. We'll pitch them on the job. We'll sell your business to them. We'll do that outbound work for you.
Wow.
If the people are good, then we'll actually do the first interview, a cultural interview, to make sure they're a skill fit and a culture fit for your business. And then we'll just hand you people who we know are interested, a culture fit, and a skill fit for your position. Well, you think how much time and energy and potential lawsuits that's going to save a lot of our businesses. So
Right.
we started doing this 6 months ago, and I think we've done 260 positions so far and counting. And everything from the CFO for national religious broadcasters to secretaries to engineers to any organization that's looking for values aligned people, but they don't want to break the bank. And it's just been really fun. When Family Radio, when we were able to place a position for them, he's like, Red Balloon is such an answer to prayer. And anytime a
Mhm.
customer is giving you a check and saying you're an answer to prayer, you know you're on the right track. So
Amen.
so we've been really pleased to be able to do this recruitment service, and we've been able to do it for all kinds of positions. What's coming is we are going to have a ATS and a talent network that's going to be launching next month, in fact. And
Wow.
and I'll give you an example why this is important. We know that there's a hiring process that's going to help you filter for culture first in your hiring process. And so we have actually built a tool that helps you shepherd through the hiring process. It actually helps you write good questions for interviews based on your company mission and your values. And it helps you build a talent network. So imagine if, and I'll give an example, we've got customers like Public Square who are out there in the public all the time. We're working with them. They have thousands of people that are applying for jobs. Well, the problem is, what are you going to do with those thousands of people when you actually want to find the one that's the right fit? And so
Right.
we will have a talent network that they will be able to use, be able to join their talent network. They can then sort, filter, tag, take notes on each one of those people as they're coming in. And then when they have an opening in the future, they already have a list of thousands of people who've raised their hand and said, you know what, I'd love to work for your organization. So we're working with a number of businesses that are just trying to figure out, how do I build my talent network so that we can build momentum in this kind of
Mhm.
parallel conservative economy. People know where they can find jobs. And again, RedBalloon.work, we love being part of this story. We love blessing employers and job seekers and kind of helping them find each other in a way that's a glory to God and good for the economy.
Andrew, it's so great to hear. And like you said, as you do what the Lord calls you to do, these opportunities continue to come because He can get the blessings through you. He can do that. And I think you prove it out. Just a quick side before we wrap here. So I was watching one of your speeches and you're at a school, and I think it's indicative of how you look at life and faith, where you said, "Hey, I have a bag of candy, and I'm going to throw this at you." Right? If you ask a good question. And if you're asleep, I'm going to throw it at you too.
That's right.
Um, so if you're talking to a student or someone who's in their career and they're at that crossroads where they're working
Yeah.
for a woke company and they don't believe there's a way out, what would you say to them about what their future holds?
Yeah. There are more opportunities out there than you realize. And I had a wise man once tell me, a job started as a job half done. Because that first step's always the hardest piece, right?
Mm,
And so my encouragement is, look, put your profile on redballoon.work. That's going to put you in front of employers. They might tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, we think that you're the right person. Well, that's a low risk way to exit the workplace. But even if that doesn't work, I would encourage you to live your values out loud at work. It's going to be good for your soul to not be afraid of the gospel and who you are, right? You don't have to try and hand out tracts. You don't have to try and, preach it in the lunchroom. You don't have to be jamming what you believe down everybody else's throat, but don't be afraid of who you are and who your savior is. And when you
mm,
do that, the Lord blesses it, and you don't know what that blessing is going to look like. Sometimes it's a blessing of everyone at your workplace saying, you know what, I want to be like that. And I want to have a work culture that is way better. Right. And all of a sudden you're being a blessing to everybody in your organization. So that's option one. Option number
mm,
two is it does cost you your job. But I guarantee, if you look at the whole history of the church, God uses stories like that to encourage the other people that are in that organization. Right. And you're like,
mm,
well, I don't know that I can afford that. Well, that's why we have redballoon.work. We want you to be brave, be bold at work, and not in a bad way, not in a goobery, I'm going to, not do my job way. I want you to focus on your job, but live your values out loud. If it costs you your job, then come over to Red Balloon and we're going to help you find a job. We've actually, for a couple of job seekers, whenever we can, we'll actually go and find a company for them. We'll actually do the job search for them. So if
wow.
you're brave at work and it costs you your job, we're here to have your back. And all throughout the history of the church, people who are brave and courageous, they're the heroes of the story, right? Think of every good story you've ever read, whether it's in the Bible or whether Tolkien or C.S. Lewis or any of these great stories. The people who you remember are the people who do the hard things, the brave things, the courageous
Yeah.
things, who end up blessing and encouraging everyone around them. And so I believe that if every Christian in America decided, you know what, I'm going to just live my values out loud, I'm not going to be afraid of this anymore, I think that this country changes in a hurry. And I think it needs to start with each one of us, right? Sitting on your
Mm,
couch and wringing your hands and thinking of, watching Fox News and thinking how bad the world is in Ukraine or China or Taiwan or DC or whatever, that's not going to solve any problems. So go out and do something, be a blessing to other people and live your values out loud. Come to redballoon.work, fill out your profile, start being unafraid at work, and God will bless it. We don't know what the blessing looks like, but it's always going to be a blessing. And so that's my encouragement to people is don't be afraid. God is still in heaven. And when you're courageous and brave, you're going to be a blessing to other people.
Andrew Crapuchettes, RedBalloon.work. Thank you so much, my friend, for being on with us. Folks, to learn more, you can go to wearethewatchmen.org. You'll find this incredible interview, more details on RedBalloon.work, scripture that makes sense for this incredible segment, and more on the news there. We will see you soon. Take care.